This guy never wrote a book, never held any real power, never commanded an army. And yet, here we are, 2,400 years after she died, and the name Socrates, it still rings out as one of the most important thinkers ever. So today, we're going to dive into how a man who claimed to know absolutely nothing managed to change the world, just by asking questions.
And this quote right here, this is probably his most famous one. It's the heart of what's called the Socratic paradox. Basically, the idea is that real wisdom isn't about having all the answers. No, it's about having the guts to admit you don't have them. It sounds so simple, right? But as we're about to find out, this one little idea was so radical, so threatening to the people in charge, that it literally cost him his life.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting. You have the Oracle of Delphi. This was the most respected spiritual voice in the entire ancient world. And the oracle declares that Socrates is the wisest man alive. So, wait a minute. How can the wisest man in the world also be the guy who says he knows nothing? That's the puzzle, right? That's the core of his entire story.
And that brings us to the biggest question of all, the central mystery of his life. If he was so wise, why on earth did his own city, Athens, the birthplace of democracy, sentence him to death? That is exactly what we're going to unpack.
To even begin to understand Socrates, we first have to tackle a huge problem. The man left nothing in writing. Zero. His entire philosophy wasn't written down in some dusty book. It was lived out loud in conversations on the streets of Athens.
So think about what that means. Everything, and I mean everything we think we know about him, comes to us secondhand. Historians actually call this the Socratic problem. We're basically trying to solve a puzzle, piecing together the real guy from accounts written by other people, and we're always seeing him through their eyes.
And our main sources are these three guys. First, you've got Plato, his star student, who makes him out to be this incredible philosophical superhero. Then there's Xenophon, a historian, who paints a picture of a more practical, down-to-earth Socrates. And then you have Aristophanes, a playwright who wrote comedies, and he basically portrayed Socrates as a total buffoon with his head stuck in the clouds. So, where's the truth? Probably somewhere in the middle of all that.
And this was his weapon of choice, his signature move, the Socratic method. The whole point wasn't to win an argument or make someone look stupid. It was supposed to be a team effort, a search for truth. He'd just wander around the marketplace in Athens, walk up to some powerful general or politician, and ask a simple-sounding question like, "So, what is justice really?" Or, "What does it mean to be brave?" And then, just by asking question after question, he'd show them that these big, confident beliefs they had were actually built on nothing.
So, as you can probably imagine, making the most powerful guys in the city look like they didn't know what they were talking about, well, it didn't exactly make him popular. And this all leads us to the tragic end of his story, his trial and his death, which, in a way, became the ultimate test of everything he stood for. So, what happened? He was accused of two things: not believing in the city's gods, and, get this, corrupting the youth. His trial lasted just one day. A jury of his fellow Athenians found him guilty. Now, his friends had a whole escape plan worked out, but he refused to go. He argued that running away would mean betraying the very laws of Athens he'd respected his whole life. So, he chose to die for his principles. And as his students watched, totally heartbroken, he just calmly drank a cup of poison hemlock and died without any sign of fear.
But here's the thing, Socrates' death wasn't really an end. In a lot of ways, it was a beginning. It's what cemented his legacy and turned his life into a set of really powerful lessons. So let's try to boil down his philosophy into three big ideas that, honestly, are just as important now as they were back then.
Okay, first up, and that is to practice intellectual humility. What does that mean? It just means having the courage to admit when you don't know something. It's about being able to say, "You know what? I'm not sure." Socrates taught that realizing the limits of what you know isn't a weakness at all. It's actually the first step to learning anything new.
And this quote just nails why that's so important. Think about it. Pride builds walls. It makes us defensive, closed off to new ideas. But humility? That's like an open door. It's an invitation to connect with other people, to actually listen and learn from them.
So how does this actually look today? Well, Socrates would go question a general about courage. For you, it might be as simple as asking your boss, "Hey, why do we do it this way?" Not to be annoying, but to really understand. It's about being brave enough to be the one in the room who says, "Wait, I don't get it," so that everyone can get on the same page and maybe, just maybe, find a better way to do things. That's how you use this to innovate.
All right, lesson number 2. Live with unshakable integrity. This is all about making sure your actions line up with what you truly believe in. Not just when everyone's watching, but especially when no one is. And for Socrates, man, this was not just some nice idea. He literally chose to die rather than go against his principles.
And what it all boils down to is authenticity. Real honor, he's saying, isn't about pretending to be a good person. It comes from the hard work of actually being that person. Closing that gap between who you want to be and who you are every day.
Look, we're probably not going to face a death sentence, but we face these little moral tests all the time. For us, it might be having the guts to speak up when a relative says something bigoted, even if it makes Thanksgiving dinner really awkward. It's about choosing what's right over what's easy, even when the stakes seem small. That's Socrates courage today.
And finally, number 3. Find meaning in simplicity. Okay, this one might be the toughest one for our modern world to swallow. Socrates chose to be poor. He believed that a life spent chasing fame, money, and power was just a huge distraction from what we're really supposed to be doing, which is working on ourselves, on our soul.
And this quote, wow, it feels like it was written for us today, right? We love to brag about how busy we are, but Socrates is warning us that you can have a life jam-packed with stuff to do and still have it be completely empty. It's such a good reminder to ask yourself, am I actually being productive or am I just busy?
When you boil it all down, all of his questions, his methods, all of his lessons, they were all pointing to one single massive goal. The whole point of philosophy, the whole point of life for Socrates was simple: to know thyself, to turn your attention inward and really understand who you are. And this is it. This is his final, most powerful challenge to every single one of us, ringing out across 2,000 years. He isn't just saying an unexamined life is kind of sad or unsuccessful. He's saying it's not really a life at all. That if you don't stop and reflect, you're not truly living. You're just existing.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. The Socratic method isn't some dusty thing in a history book. It's a tool. It's something you can use right now, today. Just think of one belief you hold, something you feel really sure about. Could be about yourself, about work, about the world. Now, what would happen if you just started questioning it? That right there, that's where the real adventure begins.